You're standing in cold, knee-deep water. Around you there is mud, reeds, the flat gray shimmer of a shallow lagoon stretching all the way to the horizon. No solid ground, no road, no wall, no name. Just a scatter of low muddy islands barely lifting their heads above the tide, somewhere along the northern edge of the Adriatic Sea. This is not a place anyone would choose to live. The water is too shallow to sail across and too deep to farm. Twice every day, the tide rolls in and swallows half the land you can see. There is no stone here, no timber, no wheat field, no fresh spring to drink from. By every rule of how a city is born, nothing should ever stand on this spot, and yet, in 1,000 years, this exact patch of mud will hold marble palaces, golden domes, and one of the richest, most powerful cities the world has ever known. A city with no streets, only canals. A city that will rule an empire stretching across an entire sea. So why here? Why would anyone, in their right mind, build on water? To understand it, you first have to understand fear. Rewind to the 5th century. The Roman Empire in the west is collapsing. On the solid, fertile mainland just behind you sit prosperous Roman towns with real streets and real walls. Acqua, Altino, Padua, good places to live. That is exactly the problem. In the year 452, a wave of horsemen sweeps down out of the north. Their leader is Attila, king of the Huns, and he burns Acqua so completely that chroniclers say it never truly recovered. A little over a century later, in 568, another people called the Lombards pour into northern Italy and take the mainland for good. So, picture yourself as one of those terrified mainland families. The army is coming. Where do you run? Where do you run? You run to the one place no army on horseback can follow. You wade out into the lagoon. Cavalry cannot charge across mudflats. Boats cannot sail in water this shallow without knowing the hidden channel. The marsh that makes this spot useless for farming is the very thing that makes it perfect for hiding. The water is not an obstacle here. The water is a wall. The refugees came meaning to stay a few weeks. They never left. Tradition fixes the founding of the city to the 25th of March in the year 421, though in truth it grew slowly, family by family, island by island, over generations of people who simply had nowhere safer to go. And now they faced an impossible problem. How do you build a stone city on mud that won't hold the weight of a man, let alone a cathedral? The answer is one of the boldest engineering tricks in history. You go into the forests of the mainland, in Istria and Dalmatia across the water, and you cut down thousands upon thousands of alder and oak trees. You float the logs to the lagoon. Then you drive them, point down, deep into the mud, packed tight against each other like the bristles of a brush, until they hit the firm clay far below. On top of that hidden forest of timber, you lay stone. And the strangest part, the wood does not rot. Sealed under the mud with no oxygen to feed decay, soaked in salt and minerals, the submerged piles slowly harden almost to stone. Venice still stands today on millions of these ancient wooden legs, driven into the seabed more than 1,000 years ago. So the city had a foundation. But a foundation is not a reason to be rich. What did these marsh dwellers actually have to sell? Look down at the water around your feet. That is the answer. Salt. In an age before refrigerators, salt was how the entire world kept its food from rotting. It was so valuable, it was sometimes used as money. And the Venetians sat in a wide, shallow lagoon under the Italian sun, the perfect natural factory for evaporating seawater into white gold. They built salt pans. They sold salt to the hungry mainland. And the boats they used to carry it taught them the one skill that would change everything. They learned the sea. Here is where the geography turns from a curse into a weapon. Look at the map. Venice sits at the very top of the Adriatic, tucked into the corner where the sea reaches deepest into Europe. Ships coming from the rich, sophisticated East, from Constantinople, from Egypt, from the spice ports beyond, could sail straight up the Adriatic and unload here. And from Venice, those goods were just a short hop from the markets of Germany, France, and northern Italy. Venice became the hinge, the single doorway through which the luxuries of the East flowed into Europe. Spices, silk, glass. Things a noble in Paris would pay a fortune for and could get almost nowhere else. Do you see what happened? The lagoon that grew no food forced its people onto the water, and the water connected them to the richest trade route on earth. They organized themselves like no one else. They were not a kingdom. They became a republic, led by an elected ruler called the Doge, and they called their state La Serenissima, the most serene. A merchant state run by and for trade, with the ocean as its empire and the canal as its street. At the heart of it all, where the deep channel curved through the islands, grew the Rialto, the commercial nerve of the city, and the great waterway we now call the Grand Canal. Palaces rose straight out of the water, their front doors opening not onto roads but onto the tide. Venice even chose a saint to match its ambition. In the year 828, two Venetian merchants sailed to Alexandria in Egypt and smuggled out what they claimed were the bones of Saint Mark the Evangelist, hidden in a barrel under slabs of pork, to get them past Muslim inspectors. The city built a magnificent basilica to hold the relics, and took the saint's winged lion as its emblem. To this day, that winged lion stands guard over the city, a marble reminder that Venice built its identity the same way it built everything else, by reaching across the sea and bringing the prize home. But how did a city of swamp refugees become a superpower? The turning point came in the year 1204. A great army of crusaders gathered, meaning to sail for the Holy Land, but they were broke, and they owed Venice an enormous sum for the fleet she had built them. The Doge was a man named Enrico Dandolo, old and nearly blind, and ruthless. He made the crusaders a deal. Instead of marching on Jerusalem, they turned their swords on Constantinople, the greatest Christian city in the world and Venice's chief rival. They sacked it. They stripped it of its treasures, and Venice took the lion's share, including the 4 great bronze horses that would gallop across the front of St. Mark's Basilica for centuries. Overnight, Venice went from a trading city to the master of an empire, seizing ports and islands all across the eastern Mediterranean. She controlled the sea lanes. She built the arsenal, a vast state shipyard so efficient it could assemble a war galley in a single day, an industrial miracle centuries before the word industry existed. This was the spot, the muddy lagoon, now the beating heart of Mediterranean power, and the riches drew dreamers. A young Venetian named Marco Polo left this lagoon around the year 1271 and traveled all the way to the court of the Emperor of China, returning with stories so vast that Europe could barely believe them. That was the reach of this place. From a hiding spot in the mud to the road to the other side of the world. For centuries, Venice glittered as one of the wealthiest cities alive, its palaces gilded, its painters and glassmakers the envy of Europe, its ships everywhere. So where did all that power go? Slowly, the world moved on. New sea routes opened around Africa and across the Atlantic, and the trade that had flowed through the top of the Adriatic began to flow elsewhere. The empire shrank. In 1797, the most serene republic, after 1,000 years, surrendered without a fight to a young general named Napoleon, and the rule of the Doges was over. And now you arrive at the strangest fate of all. Stand in Venice today, and you are standing in a museum that millions of people are desperate to walk through. Roughly 20 to 30 million visitors crowd into the historic city every year. And yet barely 50,000 people actually live among its stones now, a number that falls a little more with every passing year, as homes become hotels and the young leave for the mainland. And the sea, the old friend that protected the refugees and made the merchants rich, is turning into the final enemy. The city is slowly sinking. The waters of the lagoon are slowly rising. The high tides, called the Acqua Alta, now flood the famous square of St. Mark more often than ever. To hold the sea back, Venice has built a line of giant mobile barriers across the mouths of the lagoon, called moats, that rise up from the seabed to seal the city off when the worst tides come. So step back into that cold, knee-deep water where you began. You are standing on the same mudflats, the same useless, hidden, half-drowned scatter of islands that no sane person should ever have built upon. You just can't see them anymore. They are buried under 1,000 years of marble and gold, and stubborn human refusal to leave. A city that should never have existed, still standing on the water that should have swallowed it whole.